for those of us who were in Maputo. The Saturday's meeting was quite momentous. But clearly we have a constitutional crisis on our hands. We have had first a constitutional ruling, as much as it sought to respect the rights of an individual, one just Mawarire. It threatened also to threaten the rights of thousands of others who might not have the time to register if the elections 31st of July. And then we had suddenly on Thursday morning last week, on the eve of the SADC summit, which was postponed by a week, the proclamation under the Presidential Powers Act. So when some of us sneaked into Maputo to see it all, there's no doubt in our minds, as citizens of this region, that there was a crisis. It's important that we, first of all, set the record straight as to what was said, what was the communique. And secondly, more important that we decide as Zimbabweans, as part of this dialogue, to decide on the way forward. How do we move forward? How do we move our country forward, away from crisis towards amicable resolution?
If you read Maneru on Saturday, and if you read Honorable Chinamasa's article in the Herald yesterday, they attribute this unilateral action by the president to a tweet and or a Facebook posting that I had made myself, to say the president was then forearmed and forewarned. And he acted because I had said in that tweet, we are negotiating with ZANU PF to agree on conditions for free and fair elections, including the amendment of the Electoral Act and the alignment of all other pieces of legislation that have got a direct bearing on elections. However, if ZANU PF refuses to see sense, that's me talking on my Facebook page, then we will see them in Parliament. They are now saying that because of that, the president then had to act. I'm sure every sensible Zimbabwean would know that that is an excuse. The issue then was then to say, how do we deal with the deliberate, in my opinion, fait accompli created by the proclamation. So I don't want this point to be distorted, that there was anybody at any one time who intended to defy a court order. But people were talking about the practical difficulties that are there in complying with the said order. And most importantly, the practical difficulties which are presented and or which would fight the original objective why this inclusive government was created. One of the key political objectives why the inclusive government was created was that we needed to attend to political reforms such that we are able to create a level playing field so that Zimbabweans are able to participate in an election which is credible, free and fair, and choose a government of their choice. May I say categorically that President Mugabe did accept that there was need to have an extension of time so that we attend to those issues that need to be attended to so that we can have an environment for a free and fair election.
First, I don't want to subscribe to the view that there is a crisis in Zimbabwe. Well, if any point of disagreement about an issue is a crisis, then there are perpetual crises even in the streets because people do disagree. There was a court ruling by the Constitutional Court of Zimbabwe, and it gave a certain deadline about when elections should be held. But he, as the person who holds the ultimate executive powers of the country, had no alternative but to try to comply with the court ruling. Because if he hadn't done so, he would have been in contempt of court. And it's the constitutional court of the land. There are those who want to say maybe, and there was, in the pleadings which were going on, you know, they were obviously the lawyers, they thought they were again before another constitutional court, which is Sadc. And all sorts of clever legal sophistry was presented to those leaders. But they were not sitting as judges. They were sitting as politicians, as heads of governments, not as judges. And at the end of the day, when all was said and done, they all came out and said, go back to the courts in Zimbabwe, if the courts can entertain your complaints. We are literally being told that the people of Zimbabwe need not vote until certain individuals have decided that this is a level playing field. Now, isn't that a much, much more serious threat to the freedom of the people of Zimbabwe? That you are being told that we may argue until kingdom come, until another generation is born, arguing about perfection, and in the meantime you cannot exercise the vote. People now are in total fear. There's abject fear about the prospects of being subjected to an election and losing the influence which had given them the aura of statesmanship. That's why everybody is trying to use Sadc to continue to rule by arrangement. As to what Sadc says, you know, it is just a club. And you can persuade anybody in Sadc to be emotional about certain issues. But at the end of the day, what matters is what the courts say, and the Constitutional Court is the ultimate arbiter. It's inconceivable that this date will go beyond what the courts have said. I want to rest my case. Thank you.
I was quite sad coming here, but I'm even more sad just listening to my brother Mutsvangwa. The debate was not on anything else other than the facilitator's report. And unlike anything else that you get to hear when we come home and the bravado that we put up, there was no challenge to the facilitator's report. Not by President Mugabe, not by Prime Minister Tsvangirai, not by Professor Ncube. Because everyone knew that whatever was in here were things that had been debated and discussed at the negotiating table. There is nothing that the facilitator picked up from the street. Let me just speak to President Mugabe's presentation, just to summarize it. As far as President Mugabe was concerned, the problem was the issue of violence, and not necessarily any of these things. Not that he did not agree with these things. For example, let me just go through it in a little bit, if you allow me, Chair. He spoke about the issue of the media reforms and said, I totally agree. There are major problems with the media. But please, my friends, look at me. I'm also a subject of that abuse. He then went to the issue of rule of law. And he said, I agree. There is something wrong with the statements that the security forces are making. However, let me explain to you why I think they make the kind of statements that they make. These are people who were with us during the liberation struggle. And they have not disconnected themselves from the liberation struggle to today. He then went to the election date, and he basically said on the election date, as far as he's concerned, he did the proclamation because there was the Constitutional Court ruling, and his hands were tied. And therefore, this is why he did what he had to do. Those were President Mugabe's responses. He merely spoke to the facilitator's report and indicated where the issues were as far as he was concerned. Then came Prime Minister Tsvangirai. Basically, Prime Minister Tsvangirai then said, for him, his biggest problem is that he's coming to this summit because there is a lot of, he's coming to this summit disappointed because we were sitting in cabinet on the Tuesday with President Mugabe and with the Justice Minister. And the Justice Minister was asked in that cabinet, when is the electoral bill coming into Parliament? And he said it is coming in next week, meaning this week. When he knew pretty well that at that time, he already had done the presidential the decree. And therefore, how then do we begin to engage as a leadership? When we can't trust each other in a way where we lie and basically, you know, say those things to one another. In fact, in short, he then, I think he took his papers, he had some written speech, he put it aside, and he said, I'm asking President Mugabe to look me in the eye and say, after 4 years of being together, in fact, I've been joking to other people, I'm saying at that point, Prime Minister Tsvangirai spoke like a jilted woman, you know, when you're looking at somebody, and is this what it has come to? After all this, you then decide this is how it's going to end. But that was how emotional that whole presentation was. Professor Ncube then came in, and basically his argument was to say, as far as we are concerned, there are two problems that we have here. We have the problem of legal illegitimacy, and we have a problem of the political illegitimacy. And this is where I think he's talking about the lawyers who spoke. He basically, in very simple language, spoke to the heads of states to say these are the problems legally with what we have right now. So whatever it is that we are going to do, we have to address some of these issues. So in summary, this entire report was adopted. It was adopted in its entirety. It was adopted that we have to do something about media reform, that we have to do something about JOMIC, that we have to do something about the rule of law, that includes the security sector. We have to do something about the election date, and we have to do something about the deployment of the SADC observers. And everybody was in agreement with it. It's only when we are out there that we are now trying to play a bravado game. And for me, that's what makes me sad. Just watching ZBC, reading the Herald, reading any of these papers, you then say to yourself, how did we get where we are today? Because things are very clear when you are sitting there. Just the end. I am very angry. I am angry with Chinamasa, because I don't think anyone should do that to their own leader. What Chinamasa and whoever else persuaded them to advise President Mugabe to do those things that he did really, really is treasonous. And I don't think it should ever be allowed to happen. I thank you, Chair.
We gave a specific instruction to Honorable Minister Chinamasa that he was supposed to be filing an application on behalf of government, because there was consensus amongst ourselves that we needed to approach the Constitutional Court as a collective. Mr. Chinamasa filed an application late this afternoon, and 20 minutes before I came here, I was served with those papers on behalf of the Prime Minister, in which he has made himself the sole applicant and made everybody else a respondent. In essence, in his affidavit, which is 4 pages, he's saying, I'm coming to you to seek an extension of time because I've been directed to do so by Sadc. So he's basically, I'm sorry to say this, and I wanted to avoid it, he's basically going to the Constitutional Court to say, please, can I lose? But that's not what we agreed.
What's your advice to government? What's your advice to ZANU PF?
I've said it, Igbo. These issues were seized on by they were in the preoccupation of the 3 parties for 4 years. They never came to an agreement on those issues. All those issues which were they agreed on, they're in a wonderful document called the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which everybody else assented to. Why can't we move forward on the basis of that which was agreed upon? Why do you want us to move on the basis of which we could not be agreed upon? Because it will never be agreed upon. Then we can never have an election. That's all I'm saying.
Jameson, so
the president of his party agreed with everyone in the room to say no, considering what we need to do here. And more particularly, he spoke about voter registration. We need an extension of time. That's what the president of ZANU PF said.
Fortunately, today there was a decision that was made, and Honorable Chinamasa conveniently was not in cabinet, that the principals would meet tomorrow with their lawyers. And this, please, was not a proposal that came from other people. It came from President Mugabe himself. He said, look here, we need to find out and be clear on what these legal issues are. This will be something that will be a subject for discussion tomorrow, because there is no point in them having any meeting if they are not going to debate this particular issue. But let me just answer this thing. You know, we keep getting this thing thrown at us. Oh, this is by arrangement. Let's assume you are right that we are in government by arrangement. So we should have a government by fraud. Because basically what you are asking us to do here is for the people of Zimbabwe to be subjected to fraud. And I know we laugh about this, but for goodness sake, no one owns this country. No. We are part of this country, and we can't watch people destroy it right in our eyes. And I don't know what it is that gets into people like yourself or Honorable Nguni to speak in the manner that you do. You sit there and you literally want this country to be torn to pieces. How is it that a people that has been born in a country would want to reduce yourself to this level? Or because you want a chaos so that you can loot, you can abuse, you can kill. And I think this can't be allowed.
Can I answer that with all we did in ZANU PF is to give you the country which has made you be ministers. Yes, this country was stolen. This country was stolen. We gave it back. No, no. I'm the one on the floor. I want to speak. Yes, I agree with you. You were not in ZANU, but I talk about my experience. Okay. So let me talk. You are derogatory people who made you what you are today. That's why Sadc doesn't.
No, Chris. No, Chris. No, continue.
All of you, some of you are my generation here. Cowards. Come on.
No. No, shit. No, shit. Sadaro, man. Okay, no. Many of us are, of course, shocked that even as the signatures are hardly dry, there is an attempt to, put it very bluntly, subvert the spirit and letter of the Sadc summit. We are heartened by the news from Pricilla. There's a meeting at 10 o'clock tomorrow, which inter alia will also discuss that attempt. I did confront Goodson, who was also walked out. He didn't answer me, but
come back, Goodson. Come back.
I want, and I did say this in an interview somewhere, that it's not about ZANU PF and others at all.
No, it's not.
It is not, it's false that 99% of Zimbabweans want progress in this country. That is clear. It's our job to assess public opinion. 99% of Zimbabweans want progress, and 99% will go along with Sadc, as did the leadership in Maputo. And I think we should stand firm behind the government of Zimbabwe, the inclusive government, in their effort to get an extension, about which I have no doubt, that if as a government they stand firm, but if they're afraid of the edges, as we have seen now, which I don't think will be sustained, no. Those of us in Maputo are clear and confident that we will have an extension for obvious reasons. One, to ensure that people register. The main purpose of an election is to ensure that everyone who's qualifies to vote does vote. Otherwise, any election is farcical. We thank you for coming. I hope there will be another summit soon. because it looks like we might be having another summit soon, if this persists. But I think we still have attended us what you have told us. Thank you very much.